On today's question of faith, does changing a word in the Eucharistic prayer make the Eucharist invalid? Hey everybody, this is Question of Faith. I am Mike Hayes. I'm the Director of Young Adult Ministry in the Diocese of Cleveland.
And I'm Father Damian Ferentz, the Vicar for Evangelization.
Hi everyone, I'm Brooke Uehein, the Communications Manager for the Diocese.
2 weeks in a row, Brooke.
I know.
Becoming a regular.
Yeah. Super lucky.
Super blessed.
For
Super
us.
blessed. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem.
Great to have you.
And so this question was a write-in question. I will preserve the person's anonymity and just say that they were at Mass and they said that the priest had said, it will be shed for you and for all, instead of it will be shed for you and for many, which is in the new translation from the most recent translation. They changed that word from all to many. And so they wanted to know, well, does that make the Eucharist invalid, that he changed the words? Sort of like, I guess when we heard, back in, not that long ago, we heard that big controversy about baptism, right? When the person said, we baptize instead of I. Yeah. So what do we think? What's the deal with this? So they changed that from many to all.
I think it would depend on the word, because your question was, if you change a word, does it make it invalid? So I think it would depend upon the word.
Right.
And I think it would. I would start there. So
right, if you didn't say "this is my body," that would be that would be an issue. Yeah.
Right. Or if you said "this is my leg" instead of "this is my body," that would probably I'm not a liturgist. I'm a philosopher, but it would seem that what you're talking about, some words are more important than other words, I would think.
Correct.
And this one, the former translation was many or was all, and now it's changed to many. So my guess would be, and again, I'm not a liturgist, we could go to Bishop-elect Woost, it would probably make things illicit but not invalid, the Eucharist illicit but not invalid.
So it's interesting, this is the reasoning that I've heard for not changing words in the liturgy, period, right? That, we've worked this out, and we should kind of do it, is that, we're all supposed to be praying along with the priest while he's praying the Eucharistic prayer. And so when they change a word of their own volition, you break my prayer.
Right.
Now I'm like, well, wait a minute. And it's not your prayer, Father. It's the Church's prayer. It's all of our prayers. So, when you change that, it kind of, messes people up a little bit.
I'm reading the new letter that Pope Francis just promulgated on June 29th. I actually read it this morning, and as I mentioned to you guys before the show, the printed copy's on my desk at the SEM, but so I just found this on my phone. And this is what the Holy Father says in Article 23. Let us be clear here. Every aspect of the celebration must be carefully tended to. Space, time, gestures, words, objects, vestments, song, music, and every rubric must be observed. Such attention would be enough to prevent robbing from the assembly what is owed to it, which is what you just said.
Yeah, that's right.
This is not simply what the priest decides, but we're all part of the body of Christ, and we have expectations of how this Mass should be celebrated. So, yeah.
The other thing, too, is I think his intention, right? So let's say a priest intentionally changed, so it wasn't just a slip-up, like he fell into the old ways of being, right? But he said, no, I don't want to say many, I want to say all, because I think that, if you don't say all, that means it's not for everybody, right? That's what I would think the intention would be, right? It doesn't mean that.
No.
It means for you and for many more than you. It means that Jesus isn't just talking to his disciples. He's talking to everybody.
Right, and it's quoting Jesus. I remember when we had this first conversation when the new Roman Missal came out, that it's a translation from the Scriptures. So it's quoting Scripture directly, just as we used to say, Lord, I am not worthy to receive you, but only say the word and my soul shall be healed. It became, Lord, I am not worthy to have you under my roof, right? And so things became more scriptural and more literal in their translations in the New Roman Missal. So there's something that priests, deacons, and even lay folks can fall into sometimes, thinking, well, I know the church says this, but I think this. But then there's a lack of docility, a lack of obedience, and then you put yourself in a position where you're making other people cater to you rather than the church herself, right? And the teaching body of the church and the prayers of the church. Yeah. So there could be a little bit of hubris that enters in from time to time, it seems to me.
Liturgical Eucharist.
Yeah, but they're all...
That's a good name for an indie band.
Yeah. There are also moments within the liturgy, there aren't as many as there used to be, where these are similar words. And there is... There are possibilities to like in the introductory rites of the Mass and all. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times too in the rubrics it'll say in these or similar words, that you can, the options with the presider. They can do what they feel.
Yeah.
The other thing too, we have to think about this too, is the person's worried that this is going to make the Eucharist invalid. So it's not. It doesn't make it invalid. It's an illicit practice, which means he shouldn't do it, but it doesn't mean that it makes it invalid. Everything is fine as long as he says, as long as the intention is that I'm turning this bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ, you're generally fine.
However, there would be, it's an interesting conversation because it's similar to that baptism. One could say, well, when I was baptizing with the we formula, I intended this, but the intention alone isn't enough. So the words are important, but that's why I think there are and this is where it gets really into the nitty gritty. And you could have a liturgist that would say, no, you can do this, or what is the bare minimum? What's the bare requirement? It's similar to when you're working with young adults or teenagers more who will say, well, how far is too far before it's a sin? Right. And I would say that's actually not the question you want to ask. The question is, how do I best love someone? So the question is, okay, what makes a Mass invalid or illicit? Yeah, good question. A better question would seem to be, how do I celebrate the liturgy well? And that seems to really be helping us with flourishing rather than what do I have to do to get the bare minimum to get it right? And it's an important question, but there are better questions to ask too. And not to insult the person that asked this. I do think it's a good question, but it's not the only question. And Jesus often responded to questions with another question to get people thinking more deeply about things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and by when I said earlier intention, I didn't mean just because they intended to make this. So I meant if they had bread and they had wine, they had the proper liturgical books, and they actually read, this is my body and this is my blood, that would seem to me to be okay. We're actually
enough.
We're actually doing this. We're not taking something different that is not bread and is not wine, and we're not saying, as you said earlier, this is my leg or this is my eye. That they said the proper thing. But if they change one word later on in the thing that was not part of that formula, then you would probably be okay. You'd still probably be okay. It would still be valid, but it would be more of an illicit practice.
Right. Yeah, and habits are easy to get into and hard to break. So good liturgical habits and bad liturgical habits. Even in reading this new document that the Holy Father put out, he's got a section in there about how priests can. Maybe we'll do a whole nother show on this because it's a really good, it would be good for the Eucharistic Revival. But he gives like 7 or 8 examples of the kind of presiding skills that aren't good, ones that bring too much attention to self, the guy who goes way too slow, the guy who goes way too fast. Really interesting stuff there.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing, too, I think, we forget all the time that there are other rites that are in communion with us that say completely different words.
Correct.
The person who wrote this in, I think that they even wrote a little addendum, if my memory serves. I don't have it in front of me. Was that they said, I'm worried that I just received the Eucharist that wasn't the Eucharist. Well, first of all, okay, let's just calm you down.
Yeah.
You're fine. You actually received the Eucharist that day. Don't worry about it, right? And by that, I also mean if you were, at a Byzantine rite or something, they would hear completely different words, and it would still be the Eucharist. So there's that as well.
Yeah, there is a guiding body. This is what makes Catholics unique, is that we do have an authority that we trust and we cooperate with when it comes to our rituals. We do have prayer books that we follow, and that does make us different than some of our Christian brothers and sisters who are not liturgical. Or don't have as defined liturgical texts as we do. And so many of our texts, obviously the words of institution go back to Christ himself, but a lot of the collects and the prefaces go way, way back in history to church fathers, So it's good and rich stuff. And even in the Synod on Synodality, a lot of the folks in the diocese were asking for a better understanding, a richer understanding of what it is we do when we go to Mass, and more faith formation. So it's important question.
It is an important question. This whole this whole conversation has just really made me like, I'm just sitting here listening and reflecting on, gosh, I always say this, I feel like, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? Because this part of the Mass is, I often, I'm paying attention so much to this part of the Mass, right? Like, and to the point that I'm tuning out the distractions or the fast talker or the slow talker, And now I'm curious if, how open wide are my eyes? And again, should I not be so consumed to myself that I'm taking in this moment of the liturgy and making sure, like, okay, am I explaining to Jordan what's happening right now? I mean, I think she knows, but what you were saying you were getting the feedback on from the synod is what is really happening, and this person with their question, what is really happening if we're, changing the word or not using the correct term or language. I don't know. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I think one part of it is that let the sacraments and let the liturgy do its thing. Right. And then you ask the questions. It would be like the RCIA process. When you have people coming into the church, especially through Lent and most especially through the Triduum, specifically that Easter Vigil, they go through that. You let them live it and experience it. You don't tell them this is what's going to happen and this is what you're going to feel. You let them go through that. Mm-hmm. And then those moments, the weeks after the Easter Vigil, it's a period called mystagogia where you're unpacking the mystery. So you tell me, what was it like to go and renounce the devil and all his empty promises and then profess your faith and then get baptized and put on the white cloak and hold your candle in a church full of people on a Saturday night? Like, what was that? And then they tell you they're unpacking their own experience of celebrating the mystery. So with your daughter Jordan, I think you model for her paying attention during the Eucharistic prayer. And then after Mass, you could say, so what was your favorite part once we knelt down? Or, and you could...
I'm so scared of her answer, actually.
But it's okay.
Yeah.
That's part of how you grow and learn.
Yeah. We had a grandparents' workshop. Someone mentioned that the other day. Like, we asked the grandparents after this workshop, we brought them back to the shrine, and we had a day where we just said, well, what did you do? We gave you this workshop. What did you do with your family?
That's awesome.
And someone said that they would go to Mass with their grandchildren, and then afterwards they would say, what was your favorite part of the Mass? And they said, and it could have been anything. And they said sometimes it was the music, sometimes it was the consecration. Sometimes it was when I walked up the aisle with you to watch you receive communion. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it was the little kid in front of me's shirt that he had on that was really cool. Right. It was, and they said they just kind of let it be.
Yeah.
And then they unpacked it from there.
Didn't one of the grandparents say that she kept a journal when she asked the question, whatever her child said or grandchild said, she kept a journal and I think she gave it to her then on her first communion day. Oh. So for these 7 years going to Mass, since I've been able to talk, 3 or 4 years old, I've been asking you what's your favorite part of Mass, and now you have your favorite parts of Mass. So now that you made your first communion, you could write your favorite part of Mass, and it's a Mass journal.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
My favorite part of Mass was when the priest changed the words. No, just kidding. It's my least favorite part.
Yeah, and that's kind of, you're right. That's kind of cool. Number one, that they have that too. And I was thinking, like, that didn't come from us, right? In our workshop, this was something that the grandparents came up with on their own. Like, we didn't prompt that of them. So sometimes, the best ideas just come very organically from the lives of the people. So
it's the synodal church, right?
Yeah, that's
talking together, working together.
Yeah, that's good. So don't worry, you actually received the Eucharist. Person who wrote in to us, thank you very much for your question.
I would also recommend, and we could put this in the show notes, this is the Holy Father's apostolic letter, Desiderio Desideravi, which comes from Luke 22:15. I've eagerly desired to share this meal with you. And it's the Pope's reflection. It's a follow-up on Traditiones Custodes, but it's not so much about the Latin Mass as much as it is about what the liturgy itself is about. It's really theological. It's very philosophical. And he quotes Guardini in there. And I was edified by reading this. It'd take you probably do it in about an hour, but it'd be a great study. If you're interested in liturgy, I think this would be a great study, especially during this Eucharistic Revival.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I know what I was going to say. There was one other thing. One of the things that we did with I think it was with RCIA candidates ages ago. It was we actually recorded the mass. This was before live streaming or anything. We actually had to get a video camera and set it up and do this whole thing. We recorded the mass, and then we brought people back after mass, and we kind of watched the recording and stopped it at points and explained a little bit more. But we also told them, if there's something you don't understand, you need to say, hey, stop that. What the heck is that? Right?
Yeah.
And then we would answer the question. And people still talk about it. Like, people were like, well, that was really edifying.
It's
for
like
us.
a teaching mass. Is that what they call it? Yeah, because I remember having that when I was installed as Eucharistic minister in high school. It was like it was not like an hour.
It was
you know
a
what
workshop.
I mean? It was like a whole thing. And I loved it. And then we talked a lot about, how do we do that again for the kids nowadays?
For everyone.
Yeah. And and making sure like you're taking the time to absorb it and making the commitment, because
that would be a great thing to do during this Eucharistic Revival, would be some workshops on the liturgy and helping people understand what's going on. I was even talking with Father Chris Trenter recently, who's one of our priests who teaches liturgy at the SEM.
Who will teach me this semester.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, on Saturdays, yes.
Cool. Well, one of the things I was thinking is taking Eucharistic prayers and unpacking them, even the structure of how they flow, because there is a structure to each of them. And in the Roman Missal, there's 10 Eucharistic prayers.
Yeah.
And people are fascinated by that. And if you slow down and study these things, it's like, oh my gosh, I've been hearing this, but I really didn't put that together. I try to do that sometimes when I preach with the creed or with the penitential rite, because people are on autopilot and they're doing well, but I think a good teacher, a good preacher can help unpack those things that they already kind of know but haven't put all together. That's so helpful.
Yeah, no, that would be great. So, well, we'll put that in our little to-do list, as we go forward into the Eucharistic Revival.
We're building our team. So.
Exactly. And speaking of who's on our team, parishes are on our team most of the time, right? So Our Lady of the Angels is going to be one of our 9 Nights churches.
Yes, indeed. So I'm fairly familiar with Our Lady of the Angels, most recently because I preached a parish mission there in the spring. Father Russ Lowe, pray for him because he's experienced some medical troubles right now. And Father Rob Ramser was just appointed as administrator of Our Lady of the Angels. So it's on Rocky River Drive, right across from the Poor Clare Monastery, right next door to St. Joe's High School. It's a beautiful church. Father Russ actually restored the sanctuary. It was a bit dilapidated. Lots of blues and a big old wooden baldacchino. The Franciscans used to run it. Yeah. So there's like a side chapel, which I think they use as their daily mass chapel. But it feels monastic, but it's a beautiful parish, and it looks different than most of the parishes in the diocese. So come on out and visit that during 9 nights. That's August 7th through the 15th. Every night, church opens at 8. Prayer at 8:15. Last night, we'll have some ice cream, some Regina Caeli. Have you guys been at OLA?
Yes. Yeah. I was there with the Culture Project prior to the pandemic. There was...
Were they living there?
They were living there, and then there was also like a kickoff type of mass. But I think we were, it was beautiful, but for some reason we were taken through like a side entrance or a back entrance or something like that. And I just remember there was like a very teeny tiny like wash sink, like not, I don't want to call it a kitchen sink or a bathroom sink or something like through the stairwell that we were using. And it's like, man, this was actually functioning whenever the church was, constructed or built or new, and I just thought there's a lot of history and it's really cool. And that's one of the points of 9 nights, right? To see how different this is,
Yeah. So 9 nights a night prayer still, it's going to be August 7th to August 15th, correct?
You got it.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And so that's 9 nights of night prayer where we'll have night prayer in 9 different churches. You can go to one church all 9 nights, or you can go to 9 different churches. Try to collect them all, as we like to say, go around each one. And, obviously there are some churches that obviously you haven't been in, right? But there are also churches that are just so beautiful that you've just never experienced, that you're just so surprised by. That's been the real highlight for me of 9 nights all the time, is seeing all these beautiful churches in the diocese.
Yeah, and if you're a consider yourself a faithful, good Catholic, please bring someone who's not and who hasn't been to church in a while, someone maybe who's drifted from the faith or someone who's not Catholic or not even a Christian. Just say, hey, let's go out. Come on to this. Let's go check out this church. And then night prayer takes all of 10 minutes. But it's a great way to evangelize.
When I was at St. Michael's for 9 nights of night prayer, there was a guy on a bicycle who was just coming by the church, and I just waved to him from the front door and said, hey, 9 nights of night prayer. And he slowed his bicycle down, turned around, parked his bike, and came in and said, I have ridden past this church for so long, and I've never seen it open. Mm-hmm. And he said, he said, obviously I don't come by on a Sunday. He said, like, every night I go by here and it's never been open. He goes, and tonight was open. I just decided to come in, and boy, was he blown away. So it was St. Michael's, right? Which is just a gorgeous church. And I said, well, we're here every night for the next 9 nights. He came back a couple more times and brought people with him,
awesome.
which was really cool. Yeah.
That's very cool.
And so our scriptures for this week is going to be Luke chapter 12. A little snippet. Jesus said to his disciples, gird your loins and light your lamps and be like servants who await their master's return from a wedding, ready to open immediately when he comes and knocks. Blessed are those servants whom the master finds vigilant on his arrival.
Always be ready.
Always be ready.
You can't put off your faith. Like the Lord wants it right now. And I don't know what else to say about that. Yeah. Sound like Forrest Gump.
That might be it, right? Sometimes that's all we got. Mm-hmm. And hey, we're just 2 days away from the Hillbilly Thomist concert. Depending on when you're listening to this, it's going to be on August 4th. So that's at St. Wendland's Parish.
Correct.
The Hillbilly Thomists, Dominicans who play bluegrass music, if you're not familiar with them. Super cool guys.
Their first summer tour ever. They've only chosen 6 cities to play, and they're finishing the tour in Cleveland, so they should be tuned up, ready to go. Tom Evanchuk, local artist, is opening at 7. There'll be food trucks, there'll be beer, there'll be ice cream from Country Parlor. So come on out, bring your friends, especially those who haven't been to church or on church property in a long time or ever.
And we'll finish with night prayer with the newly minted Bishop Luce.
It's going to be off the hook, as the kids say.
I think they say it's going to be lit now.
They do. Just three emoji flames.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Lit. Right, Brooke?
That's right.
Like your dress?
Every episode, the wardrobe comes up.
Well, you're wearing an orange dress.
It
yes,
is.
It's like bright orange
It's not
dress.
like the color of fire.
Oh,
right?
yeah, it is.
Depends.
Okay.
Yeah. Some fire's blue, some is orange.
Yeah,
true.
I'll take the compliment. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome.
So we give compliments here on Question of Faith each and every week. And Brooke, thanks for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
We'll see you again soon, and we'll have all this and more next time on A Question of Faith.
Rock and roll.